Guys and girls, girls and guys, ladies and gentlemen and children age appropriate for mildly offensive content. Welcome back to Compelling and Rich. This is episode 5, and I'll tell you from the start that it might sound a little bit different to the other episodes. You might hear some chat in the background, you might hear some people walking by, and you might actually hear us being interrupted by a Polish waitress. For the very first time, we are recording the podcast on location. We are out for a stag do bachelor party, if you will, for our good friend Gary Noble, who's about to throw in the towel and get married. So this is day 2 of the stag, but Marc and I are cooking with gas and telling you about episode 5 of Compelling and Rich. And it's another first for Compelling and Rich because this is part 2 of what was episode 3. So if you haven't listened to that, probably best that you go back and do that before listening to this episode. Episode 3 was all about Marc, with a K, preparing to head off with his good lady to Las Vegas for the first time. And I had been to Las Vegas before for my honeymoon, so Marc was asking me a lot about what to expect. I did say that people were going to interrupt.
And there she goes.
Yep. Maybe we can do an episode about people who speak only at one volume whilst on the phone. Anyway, folks, so episode 3, Marc was asking me a lot about what to expect from Vegas. Marc has now been to Vegas, and I'm very much looking forward to asking him how it was, what was it like compared to how we prepared in episode 3, and what did he like about it. So, kicking right off, Marc, Vegas in a word, hit me with it.
Opulent.
Opulent, outstanding.
I just, if I had to put it into one word, I was amazed. I know I came across in the last episode and talked about how I wasn't looking forward to the tackiness and the gaudiness of it.
Sure.
I was overwhelmed in such a positive way by it all that, like, by day 3 I knew I'd be back. Like,
you and me both.
It was... They'd put so much effort into the ridiculous that it was good.
Yeah.
Like, and with that amount, like, my kind of talking point for this one really has been New York.
Okay.
Which was when we first left our hotel and we turned the corner.
So you're talking about the hotel?
The hotel in New York.
Yeah.
The best city in Las Vegas, as it was cited. And I had thought it would maybe be about... I knew it was a small recreation of the most famous buildings from New York. And there was about... I was expecting maybe 50-foot high,
sure,
fiberglass Empire State Building and 20-foot high Statue of Liberty. I'm fairly certain the actual hotel itself, like the rooms, are in these buildings because it's massive. It's the height of the hotels. The Statue of Liberty was a good 50 foot. Oh no, I was looking at her going, I've seen the real one. I feel like you're not far off it.
Yeah.
And it was done so well. And it's not just these buildings. There's a whole New York street front with the Brooklyn Bridge and like a kind of coffee shop and an Irish pub and all these New York staples that are just shop fronts for like other businesses, but they look New Yorky.
Yeah. I'm just thinking for people who haven't been or might be thinking of going, this is, if I remember right, you can correct me because your memory's far fresher of Vegas. So this is on the main strip, and it's somewhat on a corner.
Yes, that is exactly
between perpendicular streets. So it's got the space to
to branch out. Yeah, totally.
This miniature New York City front that it's got.
And right on the corner is the Statue of Liberty in her own wee pond, like in her own Manhattan Bay, pretty much, which is ridiculous. And it's right in the corner opposite. So you picture the four corners. There's New York, the MGM Grand, and Excalibur, and I believe wasn't the Flamingo another one. But it was a hotel that's not as famous, but it was amazing that those 3 things, because I think that kind of surprised Melissa and I was how massive everything was. We kind of thought the strip was one street, which it is, I suppose. It would all be crammed into this. It's so spread out that you have 3 of the big hotels, like Excalibur, the MGM, and the New York. Yeah. But they don't impinge on each other. You can't really tell one's there without turning to see it. But then when you do, you can see this massive... This is the Mario Castle, the Excalibur, the Mario Castle that we talked about. It's facing a miniature New York, and it was just incredible.
Opulence, looking at opulence.
Oh, completely. And then when you went into buildings and into casinos, the size of these rooms is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you have your preconceived notions of Vegas, and I think they were shattered because they were much bigger than I was expecting.
So did you have some of these notions going into our first conversation when
Yeah.
we were preparing for Vegas?
Yeah, and I had my opinions, which have been built on people saying things, and you see it on the TV,
Yeah.
and what you expect to see. And I just sort of realised how many questions I hadn't asked you. I think.
All right, okay, hit us with that then.
So one thing
what's a
was-
question you should have asked in episode 3?
See, when you were in casinos,
Yes.
how did you feel?
Very good question. The easy answer is there was a bit of awe and excitement, and that's the sort of knee-jerk reaction when you
Right.
first walk in the room. I'm trying to think past that, what happened next. For certain tables, there's a bit of intimidation.
Yeah.
And that's not really a Vegas thing, I think that's just a casino thing.
Right.
You'll go up and you'll see some serious hitters just
Yeah.
throwing
Oh, totally.
wads of cash, like inches thick of
Yeah.
cash at these tables, and you're going up to have a spot of fun
Uh-huh.
with a single note probably.
Yeah.
So there's probably a little bit of intimidation, but the excitement sticks with you. I quite enjoyed that. It was like, thinking back on it now, in your head you're thinking, my God, I'm actually in Vegas
Yeah.
doing casino stuff. But it's sort of surreal in a way.
Yes.
You're not expecting that. So
No,
what did you feel then?
The first thing was surprised because we went into,
Surprise.
it probably was New York. We probably walked into first, maybe the MGM. And I thought you'd walk into a hotel and you'd walk into the lobby, and there would be like a sign saying rooms over here,
Right.
sign saying restaurants here, sign saying casino here. No, the whole thing is just a casino. That's it. And it's not tables, it's machines and puggies and
Yes.
blackjack, electronic blackjack and roulette screens, which I didn't expect. We were expecting tables.
Yeah.
Maybe like one-armed bandits, like a row of one-armed bandits, but in a few of those definitely, but not to the extent like these were hangar-sized rooms full of electronics.
Yeah.
Before we even seen a few tables, then the tables were obviously all clumped together. And then we walked up to a table, and Melissa had a $20 note in her hand, and the guy, before he even like put a hand on the seat, the croupier just said, "This is a $100 table."
Minimum.
Yep. And we just walked away, like mortified.
Heads down.
Like, oh, that's a thing. And I mean, you, as discussed, you're a bit more of a gambler than I am. You've been to casinos much more than I had been.
Yeah.
And you know how much money's going through Vegas. I had no idea how
water.
much money was going through Vegas. I knew it was a big... But see, as you're saying, like, you're sitting looking at folk, and it's a $100 minimum table, and the people all have a lot of chips in front of them. Each one of those chips is $100.
Yeah.
They're sitting with thousands of pounds on the table, and that's not a high hitter table. That's not the high rollers. It's scary.
I remember in some of the hotels, I can't remember which at this point, but you could quite clearly see the private rooms
Yes,
for the
uh-huh.
folks who were really serious about
Yeah.
it. You know, those were
They were separate
folks
wee
who
bits, the high limit ones.
I wouldn't put it past them for that to be the main bread and butter for a lot of people. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
the serious guys are going in there to get a bit of profit for the week.
Yeah. It was...
They get treated
Yeah, it was
appropriately.
it was crackers. It was crackers. The other thing that kind of took us, it probably took us a week to kind of fully appreciate this. Was I'd heard that there are no clocks and no windows, right?
Yep.
I'd heard that was a thing, and I'd heard but forgotten about how they're laid out in such a fashion that you can't really find the exits. Like they're almost a maze,
I hadn't thought of that. That's interesting.
and the signpostings are terrible
Yes.
for that
absolutely,
purpose,
Yeah.
and it's actually a bit psychological and scary.
Yep.
Because we eventually, it was like our third last day, and we were in the MGM Signature Hotel,
Yep.
which was essentially a tower block behind the Grand, and it was a connecting corridor into the MGM Grand. So we would go that way to go out onto the Strip
Yeah.
more often than not. And honestly, the third last day was when we found the actual exit from the MGM Grand onto the Strip, which you'd think, famous hotel, the door to the Strip, quite a big deal. Like that's where they're going to get their traffic from. It couldn't have been more hidden. It couldn't have been harder to get to. And when you found it, it couldn't look more like a back door. It was literally in a blacked out hall. There was no signage above it. There was just a row of doors. Didn't even see MGM Grand on the doors.
Yeah.
So that you wouldn't, if you were looking for the exit, you wouldn't go, there it's clearly there. and I was astounded. It was scary.
I'd never thought about it, because when you're saying that, I'm thinking back to being in. So we were, Monte Carlo was the hotel we were in, and listening to you saying that, I'm getting images of Amanda and I walking for solidly 10 minutes through the entire casino to find our way back to the lifts up to the rooms. I mean, but going through that entire process, not remembering any proper signage to get from A to B.
You end up having to make your own signposts, don't you? Be like, that restaurant or that pattern on the carpet means this
that
kind of thing.
Bandit, I remember
and
that.
It's that I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to feel that, and it was amazing because I hadn't noticed it for 3 days, and it was actually quite clever of them. But
Crazy.
It's just and that was our main takeaway, especially because we weren't big gamblers.
Yes.
Like, honestly, we put $2 in the machine, lost one of them, then won a $5, and I've kept that $5 note because it was our win. That was our biggest win.
So that's now a sentimental.
Yeah, that was our biggest win. We tried different places. We did a bit of roulette. We stood at a craps table as the guy was teaching us how to play craps. We missed the first 3 minutes of it, and they must have been pretty important because nothing he said made sense. And he explained the whole game, explained the whole table, but none of it made sense. And I think because we missed that first bit about the pass line or something, we just didn't get it. So it wasn't worth standing to put money on because we didn't know what game was being played at all.
Just throwing the money away.
Yeah, anyway, there was an electronic machine of craps. Thought, we've done that. We're all going to embarrass ourselves with a computer. Put $10 in. That $10 is gone. We just don't know what we're doing. Totally. We just didn't know what we were doing. We felt we were quite blackjack. We had down. We'd been quite good at that. The one night we went to a casino in Scotland. Nah, I don't know why. And it's that way you're starting to go. The house always wins. Is this a bit of a fix here?
Yes.
Obviously it's not, but is it? And that was quite interesting.
I wonder if, you've spoke a bit about the psychology of it all and how things are laid out, but also how big it is. I've thought a lot about whether things like that in casinos are a fix.
Yes.
But I reckon it's probably simpler than that. They're just so big and there's so much through traffic that it's just plain old statistics of most people are highly unlikely to win anything from these places, but they are at the same time highly likely to put money into these places and not see it coming out the other side. I think it's just, it's a numbers game. It's just the sheer volume of
with that number of folk going in, the number of losers
Yeah.
is going to be higher.
Yeah, so like, we see it as a very transient thing, but the folks there that are owning those casinos are owning the businesses that support the casinos.
Yep.
You know, they're static. They're watching all of us going by in traffic and our money staying there in the process.
Yeah, we're leaving it behind.
Yeah,
Totally.
so I guess none of us know much about it, but if I had to guess, I would say they don't need to try very hard
No, to fix it.
to fix anything.
Yeah, there's
no
five folk
need.
playing at a blackjack
There's
table.
really no need.
All five of them aren't going to win.
Yeah.
And the ones that do win are probably going to take some of the money that others have put in.
Yeah.
So it's not a big loss. That was it. Honestly, I'd say we gambled less than $50.
So that's probably one consistent thing then again against how we were talking in preparation for you going versus what you've actually done, because I think we were $50 or $100 and we took our winnings to buy tickets for one of the shows that we spoke about.
We could barely buy M&Ms with ours.
But it sounds like you felt the same. You knew when to stop and you moved on.
Totally. And it was just we were afraid.
Yeah.
We were just like, we're not good at this, and we're not having that much fun. Like, not that it wasn't fun, but we're not having enough to keep us staying. And we don't have. I mean, we probably could have spent. We came home with dollars, so we could have spent money on them.
Yeah.
But we just didn't see. Because we were losing, we didn't see the fun in it.
Yeah.
We weren't winning then losing to get the risk in it. And because we're not big gamblers, but see, when you're sitting looking at people around you, we went to the Golden Nugget actually in Fremont Street, and we sat, and there was Melissa was playing. I think started with say $20. It was a $5 minimum bet. And she put her $5 down, and then there's a wee kind of light in the middle, above that you had to put $1 on, right? And this old boy beside us, who'd been there down at the table for a while, we're kind of helping Melissa and being like, "Don't hit or don't take." It was quite good of him. And then she put her $1 in the wee thing, and the guy said, "You don't have to do that. You just have to put your $5 minimum bet in." And the croupier was like, "Is that called croupier? Is it a blackjack table? Yeah, dealer."
Dealer.
The dealer was basically like, "Yes, she does. She has to put that $1 there." and it was like, we don't know what the rules are here anymore, because it's a $5 bet.
Yes.
But every $5 bet is a $6 bet.
Yeah, so it's that the $5 minimum to play, but what's the extra dollar doing then?
No idea. And because we didn't win,
Yes.
we didn't see any of it come back to us.
Is that a tip, maybe?
Could be.
That's interesting.
It could be, but it was very... This guy, who's clearly a gambler, said you don't have to do it. And the dealer was like, yes, she does.
So you've sort of mentioned in passing the fact that you've gone to the Golden Nugget, one of the famous places, I guess, that most folks might have seen in a movie or two.
Yeah.
But that's also in the other part of Vegas. That's Old Vegas. And we spoke in episode 3 about the differences between the main strip and Old Vegas.
Yeah.
And I struggled, if I remember right, to articulate that, but it seemed a little bit more rugged.
Yes.
What did you take away from Old Vegas?
The caveat to this is that we went to Old Vegas after drag brunch, which was 90 minutes of mimosas, where we were sitting at a table with two guys who weren't drinking, and it was there was 2 bottles of champagne and a litre of orange juice, and when you finished your champagne you just turned the bottle upside down and they brought you a new one. So Melissa and I drank 2.5 bottles of champagne in 90 minutes.
You are about to tell us that for me and for anyone listening to this, your memory of Old Vegas is next to nothing.
Yes, it was great.
Unreliable.
Totally unreliable. I remember we got the bus there, and we wandered up and down. Melissa paid a street performer to dance for her, and he gave her a lollipop. A lady got stuck on the zip line over it. That was very entertaining. And we lost money in the Golden Nugget. Those are my memories of probably an hour and a half on Fremont Street. No idea what happened there. I remember being nice. It was during the day. It didn't look... The word I'd heard was sleazy. That's
Yes.
what I talked about. That my friend had said to me. It was sleazy. I didn't see that side of it, but it certainly wasn't as glamorous.
It wasn't... going back to your word, it wasn't opulent.
No, it definitely wasn't. Yeah. And a part of it was, you talked about the kind of screens over the top, the kind of covering at the top, which made it feel a bit like a kind of strip mall. Like it felt more enclosed.
Yes. Because those never used to be there.
No.
I think in terms of the history of all of Vegas, that's a relatively new addition. So you're talking about the dome-like screens that cover over all of that Fremont
the whole street,
right?
yeah. But even at that, as we wandered down, and we went into, probably was the Golden Nugget, and it's a hotel, and there are loads of folks staying there.
Yes.
And I totally was like, to me, this was a small tourist attraction out of town. It's not. It's still a thriving business.
Yes.
People are having their holiday there and there alone, with a lovely big pool, loads to do there. There probably is loads to do. We didn't look into it much. The one thing we've seen that we'd wanted to do was the Heart Attack Grill.
Heart Attack
Grill, which...
I'm not sure I remember that. So what's that?
The Heart Attack Grill is a cafe where when you go in, they put a hospital gown on you.
Yeah.
When you order your food, it's a prescription. If you're over £350, you eat free.
Oh my
If you don't clean your plate and finish your dinner, you get spanked.
By
the staff who are dressed as nurses.
Yes.
And
I've seen this on Facebook.
the kind of selling point is for your own health, they don't recommend you visit. But on the door it says that. Like, they waive all responsibility for your health when you go in there, because it used to be called the Cardiac Cafe, but somebody actually had a heart attack or had a cardiac arrest, so they changed it to Heart Attack Grill because it's more friendly than Cardiac Cafe.
This sounds utterly horrible, but it's hearing things like that make me truly believe there is no such thing as bad
publicity.
Publicity. And it's just thinking about, all the early rock and roll guys of the 50s and 60s. I think particularly of Alice Cooper, whose manager would deliberately do stuff like the legendary, I'm off on a tangent here, I realise that, but I'll come back to it. So in Alice Cooper's early days, his manager would deliberately make him do things like wear a transparent suit, if I remember right.
Yes, you spoke about this.
Aye. And the kids that would go to his concerts would love that. By the time the police turned up to answer any complaints, it was so warm and sweaty that the transparent suit was no longer transparent, so they couldn't see anything and therefore couldn't arrest him. But the main thing they were doing was making damn well sure that appeared in the newspaper the next day. And when you're talking about things like Heart Attack Grill and Cardiac Cafe, it's sordid and dark to think about it, but they must see that as the best publicity they can ever have.
I mean, when America is famous for its obesity problem. You eat free if you're over £350. And outside this restaurant, there's a massive cargo set of scales.
No way.
And you stand on them to weigh yourself. Melissa and I together weren't £350.
Do you know what you were together?
She was, roughly? I don't know if you ever see her, probably shouldn't talk about her weight on a recording, but she was about 130,
okay,
and I was 154, which was quite interesting for me with the Slimming World, because I could work out where I was in terms of my target from Slimming World, to go back to last week's episode.
Episode 4, folks.
So we were, together we were, 280? So you'd have to, but going around Las Vegas, you do see these people.
Yeah.
They are there.
There is a population above 350.
And
right?
if you say you live in around Las Vegas and you're that size, you know you can go somewhere for a free meal.
Jesus.
But what actually, to lead into the next part, to lead into your next question you haven't asked, Melissa wanted to go there. The moment we booked Vegas, she talked about the Heart Attack Cafe or Heart Attack Grill. This was a thing we needed to look out for. And when we had our plans, we had our shows booked and our things we wanted to see, and then things from our conversation that I wanted to go and do.
So, sorry to interrupt, but if you're going along the lines, I think this is the part of our last conversation in episode 3 where I was talking about just how big the meals were.
Yes,
right?
Totally, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head, because we were, apart from the fact we were not sober at all when we were there, we stood there going, we struggle to finish the normal meals here. See, when our food place's gimmick is you won't finish the food here, we haven't got a hope in hell of getting anywhere near it. Like the day before, 2 or 3 days before, July 4th, right? We're in America. It's Melissa's first time in America.
Really?
We were there in Las Vegas, July 4th, Independence Day. You buy something in the shops, like, happy 4th.
Oh, man.
You have a happy 4th as well, ma'am. We went to the outlet malls, which I'll come back to actually on a point, and went to the Cheesecake Factory, thinking we're going to get some dinner, get some cheesecake. I purposely chose a side salad with my burger rather than fries, so I didn't fill up and had room for cheesecake. Melissa had a sandwich. Melissa ate half her sandwich. I ate most of my burger. That was probably about 12 o'clock, lunchtime-ish maybe. Okay. We were too full to have cheesecake. We got the bus home, went for a wee nap. We woke up at 9 o'clock the next day. We missed the 4th of July fireworks in Las Vegas, which I imagine were pretty opulent themselves. Didn't see or hear a thing. We slept for a full
so you had
16 hours.
Essentially one massive meal.
Yep.
And then didn't see the rest
of the day. No, and we're gutted at ourselves because of all the days to miss. We had nothing planned that night, thankfully. But we thought, walk down the street and see the fireworks, because every hotel had their firework display planned.
So it sounds bad again, but I'm sort of happy to hear that, because again, it's another thing that seems to be consistent between what I was saying in episode 3.
Very true.
And what you've actually experienced when you've been there.
Totally. And part of it, I think it was our second day or third day there. Now it was a 26-hour journey for us to get there in the first place. It was like rising at 3 in the morning and flights and layovers and things. So realistically, it was probably the sleep catching up with us. Plus, we've been eating. You'd said you'd only had one. Like some days you only had one meal.
Definitely.
And Melissa and I totally scoffed at your childishness. Like, what's wrong with you guys? Why can you not eat more? And 2 days in, the lack of sleep and the food wiped us out for a whole day. And we regret missing the July 4th fireworks, but we clearly needed it.
Yeah.
The heat in that place is crackers. So just adjusting is really why we slept for a whole day.
Yeah.
But to us, as far as we were concerned, went to the Cheesecake Factory, couldn't finish our dinner, and then slept for 20 hours.
So if you do go back, it's for the cheesecake.
Oh, 100%.
Amongst other things.
And in fact, when we were on one of our layovers, we stopped in LA, and we had to make a choice over, do we go to Venice Beach, or do we go to the Cheesecake Factory and get cheesecake this time? No, but the food was very interesting, actually. And Melissa recently had much of an appetite, but the food, I would say, wasn't great. Not that it was bad at all, but we sat on we were there for 7 days, so let's say day 4 or 5, we were like, what's been your favourite meal so far? And it was quite hard to pick, because nothing stood out.
So what if you can remember, did you have up until that point?
We had a Denny's. Went to breakfast at Denny's.
Just because it's Denny's.
Yeah, it's Denny's. It was their pancakes breakfast, you know, and it was good. It was very nice. We'd maybe eaten in one or two other wee restaurants. One thing we did do, I'd like to actually ask you, did you eat at any of the buffets?
Yes. I think it was near our day 1 or 2, so we were also there for 7 days. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was a buffet in the Monte Carlo hotel and casino where we were staying. Mm-hmm. That was the only time we ever went to a buffet.
Right.
One time only. Because it wasn't like, obviously it wasn't a set meal, but everything that got handed to you by another person at the buffet was like a meal in itself.
Right, okay.
You're in that psychological mindset of I'm at a buffet,
yeah.
I'm not going up one time,
yes,
I'm
going
up at least 2 or 3 times. And that's probably as close as what we got to what you've just explained about July 4th. That was one day we were not prepared for how big the meal was going to be, such that once we had the buffet and dinner, we went up to the room that night and no one saw us again until the next day. Yeah. And that was maybe, 7, 8 p.m.
Yeah.
We were expecting a full night out.
You thought you were going to go out that night?
Never happened.
So our experience was slightly different. We went to the Bellagio, right? We thought, Bellagio buffet. There's going to be a good buffet on earth, the Bellagio, right? And this was the night we were going to see Penn and Teller as well. So
just before you launch into that, so the Bellagio is that, it's kind of central to the main strip, but it's famous for the fact that it's got the fountains outside of it.
And it's massive. I mean, we actually stood at one point and we were like, look how much water is there in the desert. They talk about, like, in the the hotel when they're talking about washing towels, save the desert's most precious resource. Go down to the bloody Bellagio. There's a foot of water that's like 3 acres of water just sitting there for no reason at all. I'm looking at it going, they could build a hotel on that and make so much more money, but nah, they've just got a water fountain show, which we did see, and it was brilliant. We caught, as we came back from somewhere one night, we seen them playing Lady as a Tramp by Frank Sinatra to the fountains. That was great. And then we walked along the front of the fountains, and there's clearly a gap between shows. I love the wee aeroplane flying over there as well.
Yet another interruption. It's not someone speaking at a single volume on their phone. It's now, I think it's a helicopter. Anyway.
So we caught the Ladies of Tramp, and in the time it took us to walk from the far right of the fountain where we came out for I think it was the Mirage that night, and walked along it, they started another fountain show to a modern pop song that I didn't know.
Massive.
But it was clearly there's like a 10-minute gap between shows, and we seen both shows.
It's definitely something to see in Vegas, but I interrupted you there. You were talking about a buffet at the Bellagio.
So basically the Bellagio is very famous for that. It's like the end of Ocean's 11 is set there. The Bellagio is one of the hotels we looked at staying in because it's famous. The buffet was one of the most disappointing things I've ever been to in my life.
Wow.
I had my first plate and I took out my phone and texted our friend Paul McLaughlin, and there's a world buffet called Cosmo that Paul and I kind of go to every 6 months or a year kind of thing, and I just texted him saying Cosmo buffet greater than Bellagio buffet, and we were bewildered at how it wasn't great.
Was it just substandard food? Was it
the food wasn't
dry?
Food wasn't great. The options weren't great.
Yeah,
there was like the bit where in Britain, say there would be like a carvery bit, and there'd be like a turkey, a chicken, a ham, and beef.
Yep.
There was turkey.
Okay, so there's
turkey and some cranberry sauce. There wasn't like a gravy to go with it or anything. The tastes of Asia bit was a tikka masala in a wee bowl with some rice, some very dry rice.
Pretty pathetic.
It really was. It clearly, another thing that was just blew our minds. The way you get your money's worth there was crab legs, which is something I never had in my life. You were walking up to the buffet, and it's just no exaggeration. There were, say, a family of 5 at a table, right? And they had each a plate, honestly 8 inches high, piled of crab legs, right? Some of these people, we eventually were like, well, clearly the crab legs is a thing. Every table had loads of crab legs, right? Every table.
Why crab legs?
I think it must be, it's a rarity to get them. And we paid, it was a Friday night, we went
pretty far from any coast, right?
Oh, completely, but I mean, everything's available there, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess they are a delicacy or they are expensive, and the way you get your money's worth at this buffet isn't the crab legs, because the amount of folk that had hundreds of crab legs. There was one table that was a table for 8 people. I think it was probably 5 or 6 folk at it. but they were just cracking the shells, and the table, not their plates, their table was littered. They weren't even caring where their mess went. It just went all over the table.
Just legs
We
everywhere.
eventually were like, right, well, let's go and get some of these crab legs. Apparently, they're amazing. You went and picked up your crab legs at one station from a big bucket of ice,
Yep.
and then queued up to get them steamed or get them boiled and cooked.
Yeah.
So there's more of an experience there, but it took ages.
So I
And
guess
then-
that's another disappointing thing.
Yeah, and then we brought them back to the table, and a waitress passed. I was like, oh, excuse me, do you have like the kind of people have got these crackers for cracking the shells open? And she just whipped them out of her apron. So clearly, they're just used to folk asking for them. She must have had hundreds in that apron. Probably about 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, we'd opened a crab leg because we didn't know what we were doing, right?
Yeah.
They're
It's
very
tough.
weird consistency because it didn't just snap; they kind of bend
Yes.
and kind of snap. And then when you get the actual crab meat itself,
If
we weren't
you
that
can get
impressed.
it out.
Yeah, we weren't that impressed until we realised people had been going to the melted butter vat and just spooning out melted butter into a bowl, and you're meant to dip your crab leg in melted butter. I'm sorry. I've got years to live, quite frankly. I'd seen the melted butter, it was right, the corn on the cob. I was like smashing, so I took like a teaspoon worth on my corn on the
Was
cob.
it the plus 350 pounders that were dipping it in?
Absolutely, and it was just all walks of life were there for crab legs.
That's very interesting to hear. So it's another broad consistency. I think I spoke about food in episode 3, where I said we had a couple of good meals, I think, but nothing that blew us away.
Yes.
We went to certain places just because they had the name, be it Denny's or
Yep.
Gordon Ramsay or
Gordon's,
somebody
yes.
like that. But I think we're agreed that it is good, it's massive, but
Yes.
it's not going to blow your mind. You know, if you're the sort of
Yeah.
person that likes a Michelin star meal or something like that, you're not going there.
No, and
that's not why
there
you
are.
go
What I was amazed at is the number of famous chefs I've never heard of, because they all have their restaurants in these places. When it came down to one of my best meals that we had was 8:30 in the morning. Went for breakfast to a place I would highly recommend anyone goes, called the Ocean Grill. It's in the Miracle Mile Mall.
I remember it.
Did you go?
Yeah.
3 cocktails for a tenner
Disgustingly good.
at 8:30 in the morning.
Yes.
And I'd looked online. I'd been looking up breakfast places. And someone had said the cocktails aren't heavily alcoholic, but it gives you a flavour of what you might like when you go to a different place. And I was like, great, because I'm not good at cocktails. I don't know much about them. A lot of them have vodka, and I'm not a big vodka drinker. So I tend to have like an old fashioned or a whiskey sour. Those are my go-tos because they're quite simple whiskey cocktails.
Yep.
So at this place I was like, three for $10 with my breakfast. Absolutely. And I had a margarita,
When in Vegas.
a whiskey sour and a something else, and I had steak and eggs. Because I was like, American breakfast, I'm having steak and eggs. And it was to that point one of the best steaks I had in my life. It was delicious,
Excellent.
which was really good. But then thankfully, I think 2 days later we finally had a meal that was it. We went to Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen. So our last full day there was our anniversary, our 2-year anniversary. So we got breakfast in bed.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We got breakfast in bed room service because we'd never had that in our life. We thought, let's just go all out, and we get like pancakes and French toast delivered to the room, and it was brilliant, and it was romantic, and it was lovely, and the food was really nice. So we were talking late in the day, and Melissa was like, that's probably my favourite meal now because of the environment. It was in our hotel room. It was our anniversary.
Yeah.
It was breakfast in bed. It was room service. We'd never had that, and it
By
was
the way,
nice.
I'm interrupting you again, but I'm saying this for the record and for people listening, and I hope people agree with me. I could not be happier sitting listening to you talk about being with Melissa for 2 years. I think it's absolutely fantastic that you two are brilliant together, and it sounds like you're having as good a time as it sounds.
Thank you very much. Really, I like the pancakes. But no, that's very nice to hear.
You're deliberately stirring the thought.
I'll pass that
I
on
can
to
see
her.
your wee cheeks turning as red and purple as your shirt.
No, and it was. This is another detour quickly, but it was probably my best holiday ever.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is
Awesome.
is because of her, and we were doing new things totally together.
You're sharing it, right?
And it was. Oh, there's so many more things I'd hope that I can squeeze into this podcast, because there's things just to tell you that were great, especially to share with someone. We'd had breakfast in bed, and we're going to Gordon Ramsay. I went to Hills. We'd seen the steak place, the burger place. He's got a fish and chip shop. Hats off to Gordon Ramsay's. Fingers and pies, left, right, and centre. Went to Hell's Kitchen. The waiter clearly didn't like me. He just took a dislike to me straight away. It was quite entertaining. He just would treat me with disdain. It was brilliant, right? I don't mind.
Need to articulate.
We sat down and I'm not going to name the poor guy. I really wanted to really cheekily name him. No, he came over and he just kind of took our order, but he didn't really seem to care much. And I asked for, I think I was going to get a cocktail or something, and he was just like, yeah, that's fine, that's great. And then when he came back over, he gave us our drinks, and he brought a Pepsi for me, and I didn't order the Pepsi. But I was like, excuse me, sorry. I was like, it's not mine. I don't need it. Is that okay? It's a wee kind of error thing. And he was like, it's there now.
What?
I was like, he's also very softly spoken, so I wasn't entirely sure what he said next, but it was along the lines of, would you want it? And I was like, well, we didn't order it.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you can drink it, and he walked away. And it was very, very odd. And this is obviously like, this city is built on service. Like, every time we phoned the front desk at the hotel, it's my pleasure, sir, thank you very much for phoning. They were really polite, everyone's super polite.
Well, it's a massive tipping culture as well, right?
Which I have not an issue with, but I will happily tip someone who earns it.
Yeah.
Right? But Melissa's very wanted to tip you're meant to tip people.
Yeah.
And Melissa will tip happily. See, if I don't get service, it's great. I mean, it's a bit Reservoir Dogs, but I'm not going to tip the person. A tip is for doing an extra good job. So see, when they say, oh, that's how they make their wages.
Yes.
Do you know what? Then that's what you work for.
Yeah, that's dangerously. It's a dangerously automatic thing in the States and other cultures that have such a heavy focus on tipping.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, it was for work. We were in Princeton, New Jersey, for a conference, and we went out to dinner. Me, a couple of my colleagues, and one person in particular. So the oldest person at the table who'd been there, seen it, done it, knew a few things about being in the States. We had a guy who was our waiter for the night. He wasn't great. He didn't engage when we were trying to have a little bit of banter and just find out a bit about him and why he was there, and talk to him. It was all just very much automatic. Bring the food out, don't do anything else.
Right.
A couple of things weren't right. Mm-hmm. But then it comes to the end of the night, and the older person that I mentioned that we were with, who was kindly paying for the meal, didn't tip.
Yeah.
He had the balls not to tip. Mm-hmm. And when he took it away...
Do you want another one? Yeah. Do it two more?
Please.
Yes, thank you.
So, there we go. We did promise we would get interrupted for drinks, but it's a very good interruption. But yeah, so
Thank you.
This person that we were with that was paying for the meal, the older person that knew their way around, had the balls not to tip. Mm-hmm. But I distinctly remember watching the waiter walk away from the table with the money and the bill, and looking inside and realising that the tip wasn't there, and he stopped in his tracks. And this was a guy who was completely diluted and unanimated for the full, rather long 3 hours that we were there, eating a lot of food and talking a lot. And he stopped in his tracks and just U-turned back around and came over to our table and said, "Is there a problem, sir?" And this guy that I keep mentioning looked at him and said, "Well, you brought our bill when we didn't ask for it. A, B and C was wrong, and you just weren't really talking to us when we wanted to."
Yeah.
And this guy sort of started getting red.
All right.
For someone that was
being called
completely
out,
animated, and was like, but you should be tipping, sir.
No, I didn't.
And this person who was paying for our food looked at him in the eye and said, "That is not my problem." And that was it.
Wow.
We were, but it was so
tense.
awkward, so tense, that I genuinely felt that we were quite lucky to walk out of the restaurant without any sort of verbal abuse or, to be quite frank, physical abuse.
Wow.
So you're talking about that. I'm very much with you that it's for a job done well. Yeah. And it's for the way they make you feel. It should not be an automatic thing.
And everywhere else, because the service was so animated and so good, where are you here from? First time in Vegas, are you enjoying yourselves, what you're doing? I would happily tip them, right? I do have a slight problem when it's on the receipt it says 20% tip is the done thing in America. Yes. I was like, this is one of my respect my customs, because 10% is what I'm used to, but I will tip over that if you've earned it. Yeah. And we on our first, again, the Bellagio, we just had no luck in the Bellagio at all. We were at in the casino, and a cocktail waitress came over and, "Do you want a drink?" "Yeah, it'd be lovely." She went and brought us a wee whiskey sour and a pina colada. And she was like, gave her a drink. She was like, thank you very much. Well, thank you, that was great, thanks. She was like, oh, was everything okay with my service? Yeah, that was great, thank you very much. And off she walked. The minute she walked away, we turned to each other. We're meant to tip her. We forgot that. This is on us. That wasn't cool.
Right.
And that really, Melissa felt really bad about that for days.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, the service was nice there. And it was your first drink is free, all that stuff. We
Right,
should have
okay.
tipped her, and
Yeah.
we didn't, and we felt bad about that. So we were hyper aware of our tipping from there on in. Lovely, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So
Got some nice crisp beers delivered to us for the remainder of the podcast. This
so
is the perks of shooting on location, as it were, eh?
definitely.
So I mean, we spoke about food for about 10 minutes longer than I expected, but it's come to a good point, and maybe it's something to mention now. I reckon, these are very much our opinions
Yes.
about how things go. I think they're fairly reasonable, but I wonder if anyone listening to this feels differently or has a story that either justifies what we're saying or presents a different view.
Yeah.
I don't think we're in season 1, episode 5. We've not figured out if anyone is going to have a way of writing to us, but I'll put it in here to say that if you do have a story about tipping or a different way of looking at it than what we've presented,
Yep.
get in touch with us.
Yeah, because the thing is, I'm aware, and it is that from that as the opening conversation on Reservoir Dogs, it's not a popular opinion. I think tipping is, people have strict opinions.
Yes.
And Melissa's one who, she actually was saying she doesn't like tipping, but she's so focused on it. And she was like,
Accustomed to it.
yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite blunt about it. I'm quite happy to not tip someone if they don't deserve it, which is a terrible way to sound, but I'm happy to be that blunt about it. And Melissa isn't comfortable when I'm a bit like, that wasn't great service,
Yep.
so we're not going to leave anything for them.
Therefore, no tip.
But this one we're talking about was in Gordon Ramsay's. Service wasn't great. The meal was delicious. The meal was absolutely that then became the best steak I ever had in my life. Dessert lovely. The cocktail was beautiful. Everything. But when the bill came, and it was, say, roughly $200 for the meal.
Sure.
Right? If I'm tipping 20%, I'm giving this waiter $40.
For poor service and a drink you didn't ask for.
And I was like, do you know what? I've had other waiters who've deserved $40 off me, and they got their 20%, which was $10, $15.
Right.
You don't deserve this, pal. And I rounded up. Say it was, don't know exactly. Say it was $194.
Right.
I rounded up to 200 and left them 6.
And that was it.
And that was, I would have waited for my change,
Yeah.
but Melissa wouldn't have been comfortable with that.
It was a good compromise by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and it's because that I think it's the expectation he's going to get a good tip out of me. He works in Gordon Ramsay's restaurant. It's expensive meals.
Yes.
He's expecting that, and I was like, I'm not bowing to you here, son. Which is not. It's not great. It's
Yeah.
not a great attitude to have. It's not a great end to our meal, as
Yeah.
it were. But we had delicious dinner. We now kind of refer to it as quite a bit of a joke. Like everything that happened becomes a running joke pretty quickly. So he has now entered our vernacular of like having a great time. I a little bit like John, shall we say?
Our man, the waiter, who
Uh-huh.
delivered a Pepsi that we didn't want.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's good that, rounding this off, this part anyway, I mean, it's great that you did find something where it was beyond the bland,
Yes.
beyond the unimpressive buffet, and you found a meal that you're going to remember.
Yeah.
And I hope that poor service that you got from someone was, they were having a bad day.
Yeah,
I
totally.
hope there was something else going on in their
Yep.
life that made that the only way they could have been that night. But this then brings us smoothly or otherwise on to what I'll tentatively say is the final part of the podcast.
Okay.
And the series of questions that we got into in our last conversation surrounding theatre.
Excellent.
I was
I was worried you weren't going to say theatre there, and I was like,
no. So, for those that have listened to more than just this episode, one of the key commonalities and overlaps in mine and Mark's interest is going to the theatre. That's something that Marc spoke a lot about in episode 1.
Yeah, I think
the
it was.
very first episode
one.
spoke about his interests in theatre, going to it, being part of it, joining in, teaching me about that. But both of us very much enjoy going to the theatre.
Yes.
And for me, in our last conversation, episode 3, I spoke a lot about getting over the stereotype of Vegas was very much about going to shows. For us, it was taking the normal shows that we would go to in the UK, putting them on steroids, and just loving every single minute of it. We planned one show, we went to 3.
Yeah.
you went to 3 as well. Talk us through show number
So,
1.
show number 1 was our first night there, really. We arrived at 10 o'clock in the evening, so we went to bed in the morning. It was Wednesday. We went to see the Cirque du Soleil's Love by the Beatles.
Oh, yes.
And obviously I hadn't heard so much about Ka from you. We'd had a rough idea of what to expect. Brilliant. And I loved the Beatles. I loved this Love album they brought out. And I went in, and the stage was like a cross. With big kind of gaps, with the kind of triangles at the edges of a cross would be. And there was massive curtains hanging down. Quite a small theatre for what it was.
Which
so we were
hotel was this in?
This in the Mirage.
Mirage,
in the
right.
Mirage, which has about like 3 or 4 theatres, because there's loads going on there. And there was massive curtains hanging, sort of separating the audience into quarters as well. And we kind of sat there and were like, are these curtains going to be up for the whole show? Because I can't see what's going on over there. No, obviously they weren't. They peeled back very early on. And it was astounding. It was just a pure burst of explosion in colour. And this cross stage isn't a cross stage. These sections that are in the corners, and you talked about how your stage was a screen that moved up on its side and all this stuff. So I was like, well, Reedy had a better stage than we had anyway. Look at this.
Keep up with the Joneses.
Totally. The cross stayed where it was, but these triangle sections moved up and changed. So the first kind of bit came up, and the stage came up, and there was folk on it, and bits and props and people, and the opening number was a huge explosion of probably everyone in the show doing stuff to the song Because, and then so yeah, One Hold Your Hand, or one of the pure upbeats like one's Beatles songs. The stage came up, and it was crash mats. These people were doing these flips, and they were landing. I was like, they've flown really high in there, and they're going to land on the ground. But the stage sections that came up were soft and padded, so they landed and it was fine. And then they went down, and then later on they came up, and there was trampolines on them now. And at one point they went down and came up, and a half pipe was on them for rollerbladers, as another half pipe came down from the ceiling. So the whole moving stage aspect was definitely there.
Yes.
But it was seamless and amazing, and these people are doing incredible things, and you sit there going, how do you learn to do that? How do you choreograph your own trapeze act, right? And then there's 4 of you doing trapeze, all dancing with a guy in the middle, and then your trapeze are moving back and forward on tracks at the top, so it looks like you're flying back and forward. About 10 people are needed that can't be seen to make this work.
Yes.
Never mind the 5 of you on the stage for a 2-minute song. How do you learn to do that?
Yeah.
And this is incredible.
Yeah, so you realise then that it's not really the shortness of the time that is involved, it's like how much has been packed into that time.
Oh, totally and utterly.
For you. Like you've got that, it sounds like you had it, but you have that sort of moment of mindfulness where you love everything that you're seeing because you appreciate just how much has gone into it.
Yes.
I don't know if you're anything like me, but I'm quite bad with heights, and when I look at these folks during a Cirque du Soleil show, I tremble just looking at where they are.
I had moments of that, and it's probably entirely your fault, because you talked about Ka being a show where someone had lost their life.
Yes.
And I just thought there was moments where you're sitting going, that was just any night at any show. That could happen here. And that's obviously a lot of the thrill, is these are death-defying feats.
Yes.
But you're sitting there going, oh, hen, could you come down a bit? Could you spin slower, please, for your own sake entirely here.
Yeah.
And there's a scene it tells a very weird story, because it sort of doesn't tell a tale like yours was the story of 2 families at war kind of thing. Yeah. This sort of told the Beatles story of 4 guys from Liverpool growing up through the post-war era and rock and roll coming in and shattering the system and all that. But there was an element that was the life, for example, the thing I'm thinking of now was John Lennon's mother dying in a car crash. That was told in a story.
I didn't know that.
But it was incredibly done, because it influenced a lot of his songs.
Yeah.
But I'd say a lot more of his solo work talks about stuff like that.
So how was it done then? Because that's quite...
Well, they had a VW van
really
and they had another car at some point. And I actually don't think in this they did the mother been hit by a car. I can't remember. Don't quote me in this, because it's just a pure overload of the senses. But either they had the car come in, and this woman who was kind of wearing red in a trapeze and she was sort of like, she was maybe or maybe not hit by the car, and was like taken up to the ceiling, or something else happened. There was no car at all, but this woman in red had been dancing around and went up to the ceiling, and then like her skirts fell. And it was very clear, and I'm not very good at taking things and going, well, this is symbolising something.
Yes.
This woman clearly disappeared, and the skirts falling was clearly her dying. And then a wee boy in a school uniform comes out and just picks up the skirt and looks at it, and he's sad, and you're like, oh my God, this is heart-wrenching.
Close to tears.
This is
listening
awful.
To this.
And then it's how this wee boy was like, took this, and then his mum came back and she was still influential in his life and blah blah. But this is all in, again, a 3-minute pop song, really.
Wow.
It was incredible.
And that's just show number 1.
Yes.
So you come out, the both of you come out of show number 1. What's going through your mind?
What just happened, and it ends in such a spectacle as well. Like, everyone's on the stage, there's a big massive curtain call, and they're clapping, and there's confetti, and there's everything. Just blown awayness, which is a word now. But the issue is, you're walking out and you're talking about it, but you can't, because you're both, say you've seen 20 acts in a Cirque du Soleil show, something like 20 performances, many performances. You're only 10 really stick in your head, and you're trying to talk about them, but you're trying to talk about your own one.
Are you trying to just digest it?
Yeah, you're trying to be like, how did they do that and this happened? She was like, yeah, and then when this guy did this, and I was like, that was like when the car did this, or when the trampoline on the VW truck was a thing, and remember that car came from the ceiling, and it's just bubbling over, because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But you're just, and you're sort of forgetting it as you're talking about it, because the next thing comes in. And the next thing, it was great, was walked out, and Melissa was like, where's the programmes? You love a programme. So I went up, and I spent $20 on a book that I've read once and will never look at again. But like, I do love a programme.
Every time you look at that, you're going to remember things like,
I sat the next morning, literally I woke up in the morning, was pure flicking through it, and I was like, this is... And you learn so much more from that. The stories and that link to what's happening in it. And I've got a making of DVD that I bought years ago for this show.
Right.
That and I think it must have been when the show was getting released, and the album came out, and I bought the album, and next to it in HMV was this DVD, the making of Love. I thought I was into music at the time and bought it. It wasn't a making of the album documentary, it was a making of a Cirque du Soleil show, and I remember it being amazing. That was 13 years ago though, according to the show, so I'm going to be watching that again soon. That
makes sense. So that sounds like that's done its job. It's given you enough of a sense of there's people in the background doing stuff here to make this 2-minute song seem as amazing as it is. And
because of, as we talked about in episode 1, because of my involvement in theatre, I do analyse is the wrong word, but I sit and wonder, how's that happening, what's going on under there, and I like to think about the backward workings, because I've worked backstage at shows. I know people who don't get the credit they deserve. Not that I'm saying I deserve the credit, but I've been at shows where I'm like, those guys are working their socks off and getting nothing for it. This Cirque du Soleil show has, say, 50 performers. There has to be over 200 people working on it to make everything work.
I mean, I really do take my hat off, because it takes a very particular mindset to be that person or that group of people, because you need to be comfortable not throwing your ego around. Like, you are happy that it works, and you're happy for you, that you don't have to be the person on the stage, but you know fine well that it couldn't work without you being that cog in the wheel to make it all happen.
And it's that involvement part which is so necessary and so wonderful.
So the other thing I remember from episode 3 is talking about the sheer variety of shows that you were going to see. So after opening with the Cirque du Soleil show, what was next?
The second one was Penn and Teller, which was as I said, my drive, my reason for being in Las Vegas.
And just briefly, that was the one you asked about regrets last time, and that sort of stuck in my mind is, I wish we were there at a time where we could have gone to see them, because we couldn't.
They weren't there when you were there.
Listening to what you're about to say is exciting me.
Honestly, you should regret it. Hands down, one of the best nights of my life. And a lot of it is because I've been watching them for years, and again, good old bought the souvenir book at the end.
Was it in the Rio, as I remember?
Yes, in the Rio. So, and it was in sitting reading their book that I worked out how long they've been working together, and they talked. There was a kind of, they've been together for 44 years. and they chronicled
What,
44 years.
They've
been working together. They met when they were like
44
in their
years.
late teens, early 20s. Penn was a juggler, Taylor was a silent magician, and Taylor was like, great, you can do my talking. 44 years. They've been on the strip for 16 or 18 years. The longest running show on the strip. And they talk about how we change our act all the time. There's different tricks. If you come and see us next year, it'll be different. Mm-hmm. And when I go back to Vegas, I'll go and see them again. It'll be a different show. They would,
oh my God.
and it was they had a like a timeline in this book of what they'd done through this year. And I realised through that there was a show called, I forgot the name of it. It's not Disturbed, but it was like things going wrong with Penn and Taylor. It was out in 1992 in Britain. That was roughly when I was watching it because my brother was taping it, and I was familiar with Penn and Taylor since, let's say 93, 94.
Sure.
That's when he had the
5, 6
VHS
years
of
old
it.
for you.
Yeah, I'm now 31, so this is 25 years of knowing these people.
Now you get to see them.
Now I get to see them in real life, and that's what made it so special for me. Like, it was great, and Melissa thoroughly enjoyed it as well because people don't talk about how they love magic because magic isn't cool, but then they see a magic show and they're blown away, right? And Melissa was saying a lot of what she enjoyed was how much fun I was having, because I was just like a kid in a candy
That's
shop.
that thing, like sharing it with other
Oh,
people.
totally, and it was great, and I was like turning to her like, what happened there?
Yeah.
But she's just looking at this person she loves being as happy as he could ever be, pretty much, and she's like, I really appreciate her being there for that, and me being like, 'cause I talk about magic far too much, and she's like, this is it for you. I was like, yeah, this is everything I could want right now is these two magicians, and they're so impressive. Like, and I've been watching them for 25 years. Say, they did one trick I'd seen before, and it was,
how long was the show?
90 minutes, something like that.
So
They had one trick I'd seen before, and it was the equivalent of hearing Paul Simon play The Sound of Silence.
Oh my
it was a hit. It was a trick he does. Taylor does on his own with a fishbowl. And
can you talk us through what that is?
Yeah, so he basically has a kind of small fishbowl, and he gets a lady from the audience up, and he gives her the fishbowl, and beside him is a big fish tank full of water, nothing else. And he plucks some water out of the tank and throws it in the bowl on the lady's lap, and it becomes a big silver coin.
Wow.
Takes some more water, becomes silver coins. Takes a handful of water, throws it in, it's all silver coins. Then starts doing the pure uncle at a party, like picking out coins from behind her ear. The best thing is he always gets someone with glasses, and so he takes their glasses and he just tinks the lens off and a coin comes out, tinks the other lens off, another coin comes out, and he just half fills this fishbowl with coins, and it's amazing. And then he takes a big handful of coins out of the bowl and goes to the fish tank and drops them in, and they just sink to the bottom of it, nothing happens. So he goes back and he gets a handful of coins and blows on them, and tells the woman, or gets the woman to blow on them, pushes them in the water, and they become goldfish.
Wow.
Empty tank, silver coins, goldfish. And then he goes back and he takes more of her coins and he turns them all into fish.
Oh, man.
And it's brilliant, but to the point. And it was before it happened, they wheeled out a table with the tank of water on it, and then Taylor walked out onto the stage holding the fishbowl, and people applauded in the audience, and that, we know what's coming, this is a great trick. But like a third of the audience clapped because the other 2/3 didn't know what was going on. But it was that, like, when you hear the opening lines of Sound of Silence, you're like, oh, here, we're in for a treat now. That's what it was. Wow. I'm not going to give away the entire last trick here, but they do a lot of audience participation. So once or twice I kind of put my hand up, like, I'm not going to be that guy, but also I would love to be on stage with you guys, totally. In the last trick, they make an elephant disappear, and they say they want a human chain to go around the enclosure so you can see it's not a trick. Hand straight up, and Penn, you picks me.
Yes.
I feel dead special till I work out. He's picked about 50 folk from the audience. Doesn't really care who's on stage. Just up you come, all you come. If you literally say, if you're a kid, just come up. Don't wait for me to point at you. Just come up on the stage. And I stood here around an enclosure that faced the audience, and there was this elephant. I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to ruin it for folk who are going to go. Elephant in the enclosure. The sides come up, just curtains. You hear some clap trap things. You hear some things going. Curtain comes down, gone. I was 4 foot from the animal and it disappeared in front of my eyes. I looked under the platform, the elephant disappeared.
It's gone.
And I couldn't speak to that.
That's the sort of thing where sort of magic feels magic.
Oh, totally. And these guys they talk about how they're tricking you, and there's a whole speech about how Penn was a juggler, which takes practice, and it's a real talent to see what's happening here. Whereas Taylor's a magician, he just lies to you. There's a whole shtick on this, and they talk quite freely and openly, and they show you how to do certain tricks at some points. But then they do that. They do a whole mind reading thing where they teach you how to do a mind reading trick with your pal, which is quite good. But then they do a version of it, but it clearly couldn't have worked the way they just talked about. So he's like, this is how we trick you with mind reading. So that's what magicians are doing. Then they trick you with mind reading, not the way they told you they were going to, and you're just like, no, you're actually magic.
What they're telling you about is a trick in itself.
Totally,
probably.
And it's marvellous.
There's one other thing in here, and this is, I guess, the benefit of this episode being shot on location, because last night we were out at a bar and unbeknownst to us there was a magician in that bar who came over to our table and started doing card tricks, I don't know what it's called, but it's it's hand magic. They're at the table, you can see absolutely everything that's going on. You loved it clearly, and I can see the reasons for that based on what you've just said, but I think everyone around that table was, and this is what I want to ask you, is that I got the sense that everyone was there and magic had the effect on people of making them want to switch off 100% and just take it as it was. I just watched that story play out and really desire to be flabbergasted by what was about to happen to them, and I was certainly one of them. I felt like a school kid again, and I didn't even want to know how it worked. I just wanted to see it play out. So you've asked the right question without asking the question here. Their opening trick, Penn and Teller, when you walk into the theatre, there are 2 boxes on the stage, right? A wooden crate and a clear perspex box. And their opening trick is Taylor's going to escape from these boxes. And they say Harry Houdini used to do this trick, and he would get in the box and a curtain would go up, and 20 minutes, sometimes half an hour later, he would clamber out covered in sweat, and you'd all applaud and be amazed at it. Taylor's going to do the exact same trick. We've not got a curtain here. If you want to see the escape, keep your eyes open. If you want to know it's magic and be fooled by it, shut your eyes when I tell you. We're sick of these escape artists doing all this. We're going to put it in your hands. So Taylor's going to go in the boxes. If you want to know how this trick is done, keep your eyes open. If you're here for a magic show and you want to be fooled, because that's what magic is, it's a trust thing. Yes.
We trust that you came here to be fooled, and we're going to fool you. That's our job as magicians, to trick you. But if you go to a magic show, you want to be tricked. That's the point. We all know it's not magic. You want to be tricked. So here's your option. If you want to open your eyes and watch it, if you want to see how this trick is done, feel free to. If you want to be wowed, close your eyes now. Minutes later, open your eyes, and Taylor's on top of the box, covered in sweat, done his job.
What did you do?
I opened my eyes. I couldn't not. And he did a much longer speech about how if you watch it, don't ruin it for someone beside you who shuts their eyes. Don't go out into the foyer and talk about this. Do not ruin it, which is why I've told so many folk about this, but haven't told them anything.
Yes.
Because Penn told me not to. But it was like, if you want to see how magic is done, then you can. But like, this is one of the first ideas they had as a team. It said in the kind of book later that they had this idea of just shut your eyes and you won't see the magic, because that's what you've opted to do by coming to a magic show, is be fooled. You want to be fooled. It's now entirely in your hands what you do. Mm-hmm. But because I grew up with my brother being a magician, I couldn't not want to see how they done it. I just couldn't. Yeah. I had to see how it was done. And it's amazing. And I've got a photo of me in the box that Taylor was in. Like, you go up and investigate and see the boxes. Wow. You get to go up and stage and entire. I was in the box Taylor escaped from. I can't believe that he escaped from it. And I was in it. Even knowing it. So this is another bit of a massive detour, but I get chills listening to that, because it really takes me to an interview with a really famous scientist talking about science. Mm-hmm. And it's, some people who know me will laugh
And I say this name because I'm an absolute fanboy of someone called Richard Feynman.
Yes, you are.
You know this. You're one of these people smiling and going, "Oh my God, he's going to talk about him again."
Feynman again?
But in a nutshell, one of the best people who can be both a brilliant scientist and a spectacular orator. I mean, these are the two things that I love the most. Like, I love being able to do science and being able to speak quite well in front of an audience. But what you've reminded me of is an interview that Richard Feynman did, where he was talking about the fact that he could not understand people who think that science takes away from things. Like the fact that it makes things boring or it sort of reveals what's going on. And this is what you've reminded me of, because you've gone up, you've watched it, you've then gone up to inspect the box, and because you've actually done all of that, it's added to the fact of how awe-inspired you are by what you've seen. And he was saying the same thing, which was, I don't understand why people think that science takes away from things, it only adds. And he was talking about the example of, watching a bee going on to a flower to take honey. It's like you can watch that and look at it very artistically, you could draw that, but if you understand that the bee is not only extracting the nectar to then go and make honey from it, the next question is, well, how does the bee know that that's the right flower? And we can see that it's a red flower, but what does the bee see? How are their eyes different from us? And you can keep asking those questions, and every single question adds to the magic rather than takes it away. So, with me having said that in a massive detour, is that what it was like when you looked at the box? What were you thinking about when you got to the point of actually understanding the anatomy of the trick?
I was frustrated. I was frustrated, and I'll get into that second example as well, because I was in that box and I checked it, and everyone thinks they're a pure smug git. I've seen the cards, I know what I'm doing, right? And because my brother was a magician, I knew air quotes, I knew what I was looking for.
Yes.
I did a buggery. I was looking at a box, and in hindsight, I've actually looked at the photo and investigated the photo, and I see how it was done now.
Okay.
And but the way they were presenting the box, I don't think you could have found out how it was done. So even though you were given the chance to inspect it, you weren't.
There was another trick in that.
And that was incredible. The other part that adds to it was when the programme, the souvenir book, is essays written by Penn and Teller.
Yes.
But on the other one, so it's
Penn is writing about Teller
by Taylor and Taylor by Penn.
Okay.
And one thing later on that Taylor talks about when he's talking about how you do tricks, like a way to break down how to do magic, one thing he says is, once I've done the biggest part of a trick, tell a joke. Make it entertaining. Make your show entertaining. When you've done something really important for the trick, hit them with a laugh, because the brain can't process what just happened when it's laughing, because you're so taken up with the entertainment value that you can't go back and work out what's just happened. And I was frustrated at this, because I said to Melissa before, one thing I love, Taylor doesn't speak. He is a great facial actor, like Rowan Atkinson level facials.
Oh, yes.
And it's just wee kind of smug smiles, or like something happens and he kind of shrugs his shoulders. And one thing I love about him is like when he did with the coins, for example, he threw the coins in and nothing happened, and he turned and went, like, smiled to the audience, well, what you gonna do? Wah wah. But that was when something was happening. Something had just happened and he was distracting us from it. But I didn't know this till I read the book. And I'd read the book after I watched the show, and I was raging, because one thing I love about him, it turns out, is how he's playing the best trick on us all. Like, he's doing things to distract us from what's going on, and that's my favourite thing about him.
He doesn't have to say a word to
No,
do it.
he doesn't. That's his magic is amazing when he doesn't speak at all. But this box, I'd been in it, I knew it was happening, I now know how it was done. I'm raging I didn't catch it. But that's what you want from magic. You want to know how it's done, and you want to be upset when you find out it's dead simple, kind of thing. And that was them. I was just happily frustrated.
Yeah.
Like, when I go and see them again next time, I'll be watching out for when Taylor does something funny. I'll be like, something's just happened, I'll try and work out what's going on. And I still won't get it, but I'll feel like I'm inside the trick, which is what they're doing. That's how they get you kind of in, kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm listening to this thinking you probably could have gone to Vegas and done that alone, and you would have
I would have flown in and flown home. Yep.
Yeah, that would have been it.
Topped by the fact that Penn and Taylor do a meet and greet after the show. So when they go off the stage and you leave the theatre, you walk out, teller sitting on a stool, then round the corner Penn standing there. And you take a photo with him and you sign your ticket. And after 25 years, I heard Taylor speak. And that's what got me. Was walking up to him and he just stands and he's beckons you over and you stand there and he takes your phone off you, takes a selfie with Melissa and I. And as he's doing that, or he takes the photo, could you sign my ticket? Is that okay? He went, yeah, sure, no bother. I have never heard this man speak, and he just says to me, sure, no bother, and I literally was like, thank you. I was like, thank you for everything.
Yeah.
And he went, thanks for coming along. Signed it, sent us packing.
I mean, those guys know that they're in the only place that they should be. They could probably stop tomorrow. They don't need to work again.
Oh no,
but,
no, they've made their
they're
money.
not doing it just for that.
No.
It's funny you mentioned him speaking because I had seen him very recently acting in The Big Bang Theory, playing one of the characters' dads, and he had to do a few lines in that. There was a sort of,
is it Amy's dad?
Amy's dad,
and he's
right,
like, the wife's quite over. I've not seen this, but the wife's, I've heard recently, the wife's overbearing. He doesn't get the chance to speak, and that's obviously playing on Taylor.
So it's a sort of fourth wall thing. People know who's playing him, so they know he shouldn't talk much. But still, he does have a few lines, and you think then, oh my God, it's like when you see someone who's on radio, they don't look anything like what your mind tells you they should look like. Man, we could probably keep talking about Penn and Teller all night, but I think that the good thing about that is it tells me just how massive an impression it's had. So
it was brilliant.
If we are lucky enough to ever go back to Vegas, that's the one thing I'm going to do, and I'm sure anyone listening to this is thinking the same.
Yes.
I hope they are anyway. So let's try to round off the podcast by getting ourselves from show 1 to, and finally to show 3, which I'm taking a deep breath thinking about because that is completely different.
3 was drag brunch. And Melissa is a big fan of drag queens.
So where was drag brunch?
And I'm becoming one. It was in Senor Frogs, which is the classiest sounding restaurant in the Mirage again.
Right.
No, Treasure Island, sorry. Treasure Island.
We've talked about a few places. Mirage and Treasure Island, if I remember right, are quite far down the strip.
Yes,
yeah?
they're almost at the end of the strip norm.
Yes.
Because then there's a big gap before, like the Rio's miles away before the Stratosphere, which interestingly you talked about how you walked from the Mirage to the Stratosphere, and there was nothing. There's a building site and nothing there in the soaking rain. And I was like, I want to do this journey, I want to see it.
So let's get to that, but tell us first about the show.
Okay. So, drag brunch. I don't know how into drag queens you are, but a lot of what a drag queen show is lip syncing, right? So we go in and we're like, and I realised this recently at a drag show, and was about like, I quite like drag queens, right? But the lip syncing thing, I'm not that impressed by it. I don't really care. Like, it's great.
So do you mean that they're lip syncing against a song?
So they play some songs and they perform to the song. Okay. They sing it and they dance. And it's impressive, don't get me wrong, but I'm a bit like, I'd seen previous ones the drag queen sang. Yes. Just sing it. And I know that everyone's a good singer, and I know this, that and the next thing, but it's a lot of lip syncing, which I didn't know. I watched an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, and a lot of it's based on that, so I've learned that.
Okay.
But there were 5 or 6 drag queens in this show. There was a show at 11:30 and one at 2:30. We went for the 2:30 one, and thank God, because the 11:30 one, for actual brunch, it was tacos. It was a buffet of tacos. You ever tried building tacos at a buffet when you're walking? Doesn't work. Melissa had rice and wedges for breakfast that day. I'd made tacos, which were just shambolic.
Were you wishing that you had crab legs at that point?
Yes. It was insane. It was like there was a cereal, and then there was like sausages and scrambled eggs and stuff, which I just think the sausages are so not up to scratch that I'm not having an American sausage. Then it's just tacos. Yeah, fine. I'm just throwing mince at things and hope for the best. And you're sitting eating tacos, drinking champagne and mimosas, and these drag queens are performing. And there's a variety of, they come out all in these like dresses printed with dollar bills,
right? And
they talk about how someone's going round with a bucket, and if you give her like a $20 note, she'll give you 20 singles, because you're going to give the drag queens singles as if you're in the strippers.
Yes.
Because they sing on the stage, then they walk through the audience singing, dancing, performing, taking singles off people. Great way to make money, by the way. Great way to make money. And that was it. So it was an hour and a half of champagne, drag queens, such a variety. One came out, and some of them, honestly, I just turned to Melissa, I was like, she's smoking. I do not see how she is a man. Because that's the thing, you totally forget that they're men. Some are very obvious, like drag queens.
Yeah.
One of them was stunning. She was gorgeous, and I was like, I don't think that's a man. Honestly, I don't think it's a man. Tina Turner came out. Like, this woman could not have been more Tina Turner. She sang Private Dancer, simply the best. And she was amazing. And she looked like Tina Turner. One of them did a dance to the Mortal Kombat techno tune, which was just like, it was that way, like, they basically do 3 or 4 songs kind of mashed in together, like one after the other. And it was that way, like, the old song finished, and it was just like, dun, 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 dun. And I just turned to Melissa.
I know what that is.
And then it went, fight! I was like, this is the boys. And it was incredible. I would have said the drag brunch would have been alright. It was probably the show I was least looking forward to. It was the cheapest show we went to as well.
Interesting.
So maybe $75 or $100, right?
Okay.
To get your breakfast and tacos and that much champagne and that much entertainment, probably the best $75 you could spend in Las Vegas. Even if you're not into drag queens.
Superb value.
Yes, I would recommend going just for the crack. Like, it was so good, so involved, so entertaining.
That's switching off in a very different way.
Oh, completely. And I think if you're not into it, this would help you get into it.
Yeah.
And if you're not into it, you're getting champagne for an hour and a half. Just get involved. And at the end of it, they were like, we've got merchandise now. And I was drunk enough, I was like, buying a t-shirt. So I have a t-shirt that says resting brunch face. That's with a drag queen on it.
2 bottles of champagne will do for you.
Totally, literally. It was brilliant though. It was just really good.
And so was that definitely was that in chronological order then? So that was the last show that you saw of the 3?
Of the 3, yes.
Of the 3?
But you know me, Mark.
A very cheeky face.
We went into Excalibur, and Excalibur says, Tournament of Kings. Come and see live jousting and Knights of the Realm with a medieval meal. Absolutely.
You said yes, pal, didn't you?
Oh, we did. And it was, honestly...
This was number 4 then?
One of the best, worst things I've ever seen in my life.
The best, worst things.
Excuse my French here. Terrible. It was... Like, coming from Britain, having seen pantomimes, it was a pantomime tournament of kings, and your seats are in sections of countries. So we were sitting in France, so we cheered on the French king who was in this tournament, and there was jousting, there was sword fighting, there was a dragon, there was bangs, there was a wizard, there was a maiden, there was horse dancing, and there was a meal served to you with no cutlery. You had to eat like potatoes and chicken with your hands, and tankards of Pepsi, and like tomato soup out of a bowl with a handle you just poured into your mouth. Yes. Then apple pie, good old medieval apple pie. Eating apple pie with your hands is rough though.
Have you got burns?
And it was but it was one of those, like, as it was going on, we just kept looking at each other. We were like, what the hell is happening? France. Did they win? I don't. What's happening? And it was, honestly, see if you have kids or a big drunk bunch of the boys, it's probably great. But see when you're sober as a judge and you're with your girlfriend and you're just trying to work out why you opted for this, and we were both really keen. So bizarre. Entertaining and bizarre. And there's like the warnings outside saying, do not use thy camera in this show. And then under it, if you have allergies to horses, just sit quite far back, because horses and dirt, or horsehair and dirt, might fly up. Like, I'm having a meal, and there's an option for horsehair to fly out.
I'm going to pick hair out of my dinner.
Oh, it was. And your dinner was just a small hen, fried.
Really?
Just on your plates, the small hen sitting there. I'll show you a photo. I'll put photos on our social media when we have it. Small hen, 2 roast potatoes, American like purple potatoes, stick of broccoli. Odd.
So I'm pleasantly surprised that you've given us a show number 4, and I think it brings us quite nicely to the end of this podcast as well, because you've ended with the word bizarre and we've started with the word opulent. And just like episode 3, a lot of what you've said has been nostalgic for me. It's been remembering my experiences of being there. But I think now that you've actually been able to sense check a lot of what I said in the beginning.
Yes.
I'm hoping that anyone listening to this gets the taste for it. Even though the buffet is going to be disappointing, there's plenty to do with other places that you can eat. There are plenty of shows that will blow your mind.
Yes.
There is lots to see, lots to do, and I'm coming back to the thing that I said, which was surreal, mind-blowing, just enough to overload your senses to make you numb when you come back.
Well, this is,
and I've loved talking about it.
My friend had told me she went for 2 weeks and that was too much. On day 5, I turned to Melissa and said, "We're coming back here." And she said, "I think I'm fine." I'm not.
Yeah.
I've not seen enough. David Copperfield is there. That Michael Jackson show, I really wanted to go to that. We went to a comedy club as well. Like, there are things to be done that I haven't done. We did the Grand Canyon. I didn't even get on to speaking about that.
So let's take episode 5 in the very same direction as episode 3.
Did this happen last time?
We thought we were going to finish and then we launched into another part. So you explicitly said that you were not going to do the Grand Canyon. You were unimpressed with the thought of it. And I don't think even anything I could have said in episode 3 changed your mind. You were not set against it, but set on the fact that you were going to spend your time elsewhere. How the hell did you decide to go to the Grand Canyon?
I think we were maybe 3 days in, and I just thought, there's loads to do here, and we've done loads, maybe 4 days, and we've been to like an outlet mall and we've done this, that and the next thing, and I just thought, Sunday, we've not got plans yet for the whole day. She really wants to go to the Grand Canyon, and I would like to see it. Stop being a prick, Mark. Let's go to the Grand Canyon. So I said this to her, and she said, "But do you want to see it?" I was like, "I've been saying for months I would like to see it, but I feel there's other things to do." But at that point I thought our time is best spent doing, and we went to see Penn and Teller. That was my choice.
You were done?
We went to see the Beatles Cirque du Soleil show. Yeah. That was my choice.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to keep this 2-year relationship going, I should start doing something for her.
Well, I'm very much jumping the gun when I say this, but there's a rhyme that you will know very well, which is happy wife, happy life.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's what you were doing.
Yeah, pretty much.
So how did you decide to do the canyon then? Because we spoke about the fact that you can do it sort of hiking style, you can go on mules down into it, you can go along the river, you can go in a helicopter. What did you do?
So we went for an option which was it was actually a really good option. It was a bus there, and a lot of me thought it's like a 5-hour bus trek.
Right.
The one that we went for, it was 3 hours in the bus, which included a stop off at the Hoover Dam. And I was like, brilliant, there's engineering and science in it. Here, that's my hook. Man alive, the Hoover Dam's amazing. I'll come back to that later at some point. Just the Hoover Dam is brilliant. Worth seeing.
Yeah.
They built, after 9/11, you can't drive over the Hoover Dam on the road to anywhere. It's a tourist site that's run by the National, what are they called now? Homeland Security.
Okay.
So they had to build a second bridge beside the Hoover Dam to go over, and all the chat about the organisation of that was incredible. But this package that we got was a 7 a.m. bus where you get breakfast in the bus, and when you get to the Grand Canyon you get to one point of it, Eagle Point, then you go to Guano Point, and then you go to the ranch. It's all run by Hualapai Indians, which I'm still going, do we not call them Native Americans? Like, what's the rules here? But they were calling themselves Hualapai Indians. And we got our lunch there as well, barbecue lunch, which is ridiculous, just a pure big roast leg of lamb, mashed potato, corn.
Salivating.
Brilliant.
To this.
And so you stop 1, you see a lot of Grand Canyon, you get some lovely photos, it's beautiful. You're told not to go near the edge, and there's folk going under the chain at the edge. You're like, going to get a grip. That's awful. This is the Grand Canyon. And then we go to the next point, which has this sort of peak of rocks that looks man-made. It's too perfect to be natural, I think. Yeah. Which you climb in, and it's kind of at I don't know the geographical name, but it's a point that goes into the canyon. So the Grand Canyon's on both sides of you, and you're looking down on it. And then there was loads of mining done in this time. So there's a tower for like winching materials up that took 3 years to build, and the wee sign said, and then a jet clipped the cable 3 months in, and it was never used again.
My God.
And that was the point. I thought, now's the moment. Melissa and I are at the edge of the Grand Canyon, and I got down on one knee, and your face has just totally changed. And I said, could you please just wait while I tie my shoelace? And it was worth every second.
This is why I think we like each other so much, because you think I'm the worst human being in the world, but I think you've just topped it and won there. This is a game of one-upsmanship here, and
it's brilliant.
That is dark. You are a fucking horrible man.
I think she looked quite happy, and then she
Was
looked.
she relieved?
I think she was like, she looked a bit like, is this it? And then she said later in the day, after she'd struck me. No,
as you said, my face very
totally
much
changed,
dropped, almost as if you were planning to reveal something else.
Well, we've been together for 2 days now, and I
podcast.
hadn't announced that I'd proposed to my girlfriend, so it would have been amazing to do it now. But she did say she appreciated it, which is thank God, because it could have been the end. It was too perfect. It was, honestly, if I'd had a ring, I probably would have, because it was a beautiful place to do it. So entertaining to not, though.
So this is another weirdly consistent thing about what we spoke about last time, because I remember getting to the end of the time in the canyon, and an ex-Navy SEAL sort of guy pretended to trip and almost go over the end.
Yeah.
So it was like a very dark joke, but he knew what he was doing from the beginning, and you've just laid on a very similar sort of
I'd planned it for weeks at this point. I think that was going to happen.
I shouldn't laugh.
But no, it was marvellous, and it was very hot. It was very, very hot. I'm glad we did it. I'm really glad we did it. So I was basically, what a lot of things I've learned is that Melissa's right, and I didn't know that. I don't give her the credit for being right a lot. The Grand Canyon, we totally should have done it, and we did.
You're glad you did. So you sort of did the hiking style the way that I and me and Amanda did.
And it was great. It's
brilliant.
It's so big, it's ridiculous, but it was wonderful to see. And then we get the bus home again, and we were home for like 5 o'clock, so it wasn't the whole day as such. And we went home, had a shower, tidied up, and then went to see Tournament of Kings. So the day ended shockingly.
Well, you go back to bizarre then. So
yeah.
Well, maybe we can come to a natural end of the podcast then, and not go into another section, because I'm now thinking we've come from opulent to bizarre to utterly surprising, and who knows, maybe next time you go to Vegas you'll be getting down on one knee for a very, very different reason. But it's been great, very nostalgic for me. I've learned a lot more of things that I didn't do at the time there, and I hope that anyone listening to it is inspired to try it for themselves, and maybe have stories that neither of us have learned for ourselves.
That sounds good. No, it was brilliant, and I think I spent a lot of the time turning to Melissa and saying, either, oh, Marc told me about this, or I'm going to tell Marc about this. Like, my holiday was totally influenced by that in a good way, of, oh, we should try this because they did this, and either one-upmanship, they did this, we'll do this instead, or they did this, let's do it.
Yeah. And
it got to the last night, and it was our anniversary. What do you want to do tonight? We've seen Magic, we've seen Cirque du Soleil, we've seen Drag, we've seen Tournament of Bloody Kings.
He says rolling.
Yeah, so like, we could go and see another Cirque du Soleil show, we could go and see David Copperfield more Magic, but I feel we'd compare the magicians then.
Yes.
What do you want to do? And I was like, I would say the top options are comedy or music.
Yeah.
And your options for music are Gwen Stefani, Christina Aguilera, Robbie Williams, or Michael Jackson. And I'm sitting there going, what do you want to do about the Michael Jackson thing that Mark Reed told me about? Comedy Club. And the Comedy Club was very good, it was brilliant, but it was that way, like, we'd seen these different shows, and we had more options, but we haven't seen Michael Jackson, we haven't seen 3 of the other Cirque du Soleil shows that are there, or David Copperfield, or other things we don't know about.
Yes, absolutely.
There's so much still to be tapped there, which is why, to me, I'll go back. There's stuff you talked about I haven't done, there's stuff I've just talked about that you haven't done.
Definitely,
and it's just, it totally informs you, which is what the plan is for this podcast, but we're sitting going, I'll do that.
Yeah.
I did some things you said, I did other things to tell you about them, kind of thing.
That's
and
it.
it's worked out beautifully.
It's the name of it, right? I mean, we want these stories to be compelling and rich.
They do.
And we want it to be a way for people to get into stuff that they might not have thought about before, or they want a different way to get into it, such that they're not simply Googling everything, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting out of this as well. So the main thing, apart from that I'm getting out of it, is that you'll be down on one knee at a Michael Jackson show next time
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
you're in Vegas. So, folks, stay tuned for series 36 of Compelling and Rich, when we'll tell the story of how Marc went down on one knee in Vegas. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I certainly have, and it would be brilliant to hear about your own stories of having been in Vegas or having been now inspired to go to Vegas based on these two conversations. And we will see you and hear from you again very, very soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And we'll go and enjoy the rest of Poland. Wishes good luck.